thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and especially to Mayor Kazmark for uh, hosting us originally in Woodland Park and now virtually in Woodland Park. We appreciate your leadership. And of course, Woodland Park has been hit hard by the pandemic, as so many other communities have as well. And I appreciate the rest of our fellow New Jerseyans who will share their stories with you shortly. I appreciate them sharing their personal stories to make the case of why this legislation is important to become law. So I'm here to say that help will soon be on the way. This month, we will likely reach a grim and heart-wrenching milestone. Over 500,000 lives across America that have been claimed by COVID. In most cases, families never got to kiss them goodbye or say a final prayer at their bedside. And on top of the grief that is ripping through the nation, the economic suffering unleashed by the pandemic has been pretty outstanding. Many big corporations are richer now than when the pandemic started, but millions remain out of work, and too many small businesses have closed their doors forever. State and local governments are struggling to keep police officers, firefighters, teachers, and other essential public employees on the job. And the stubborn inequities ingrained in our economy before the crisis placed a disproportionate share on the suffering of minority communities. Meanwhile, we remain locked in a race against the coronavirus. Transmission appears to be slowing, but new strains are spreading. And the longer we allow it to spread, the more it will mutate and threaten the efficacy of our vaccines. So we cannot give in to the temptation to take off our masks and end social distancing. We are nowhere near where we need to be. The Trump administration claimed 20 million Americans would be vaccinated by December, but by year's end, only 2 million people received their shots. So I'm encouraged by the Biden administration's recent efforts to ramp up distribution and acquire more doses. But the fact is, we need to enhance our distribution system to get more vaccinations into arms throughout New Jersey and the nation. We need bold action and fast. Throughout the impeachment trial last week, House and Senate Democrats worked together to continue finalizing President Biden's American Rescue Plan. We will not repeat the mistakes we made a decade ago when we bent over backwards to please our GOP colleagues and watered down our stimulus, which subjected people to a longer, drawn-out recovery from the Great Recession. Not this time. This time, we will give President Biden the resources necessary to defeat the pandemic, help struggling families, and turn our economy around. Economists with Moody Analytics say that the American Rescue Plan would allow us to reach full employment by the start of 2022 and create 7.5 million jobs before the end of the year. But without further action, the Congressional Budget Office says our recovery could take 4 years. That's unacceptable to me, and I bet most New Jerseyans who believe this catastrophe has dragged on long enough. The American Rescue Plan puts us on a path to end the pandemic once and for all. It includes many priorities I have spent the past year fighting for. First, it will create the kind of supercharged federal vaccination effort the last administration should have started but didn't. Right now, our communities don't have the resources to quickly and equitably vaccinate people, and frequent supply shortages for vaccinations and testing equipment hold us back. The American Rescue Plan includes $20 billion for a national vaccine program, $50 billion for testing, $30 billion in disaster relief funding to secure more PPE, and $10 billion to expand domestic manufacturing of pandemic supplies. Secondly, we help struggling families and small businesses survive this crisis. Across America, more than 1 in 3 households and half of Black and Hispanic households are struggling to pay for basic expenses like rent, groceries, and healthcare. In addition to extending unemployment benefits, this bill provides working people with another $1,400 direct payment on top of the $600 that we passed last December. It's not only a lifeline to families, but also it helps to jumpstart our economy and our recovery. We also expand the child tax credit and expand the earned income tax credit, which would lift over half of the poor children in our country out of poverty and help address racial and social economic disparities that have been magnified during the course of this pandemic. Many of these families will also benefit from the help I fought to include for renters and homeowners. The American Rescue Plan includes $25 billion to help renters and small landlords, $10 billion to struggling homeowners so that they can keep their home and stay in it, and $5 billion to combat homelessness. The latest version also invests $100 million in housing counseling that I have championed to help homeowners navigate government programs, negotiate with their lenders, and avoid foreclosure. And on the small business front, I'm proud to say that the plan includes direct assistance for the restaurant industry, thanks to a bill that I've been pushing called the Restaurant Act. Our restaurants have been hit incredibly hard by this crisis, and it's fair to say that past initiatives were not catered to their needs. This legislation's $25 billion revitalization fund will help save the family-owned restaurants, the mom and pop delis, the bars and eateries that make New Jersey such a great place to get a bite to eat. So again, we're talking real targeted relief to working families and the small businesses that define our communities. Thirdly, the legislation includes $350 billion in direct aid to state and local governments. As you all know, soaring coronavirus response costs and plummeting tax revenues and the Trump administration's hands-off approach to this pandemic wreaked fiscal havoc on our states and communities. That's why last summer I introduced a bipartisan piece of legislation called the SMART Act to shore up our state and local governments. And while governors and mayors from both parties supported it, we couldn't get our Republican colleagues to consider it. Fortunately, it's a new day, and I'm proud to say that direct, flexible funding to every state, county, and municipality is in the American Rescue Plan. At the end of the day, we're hoping to bring home around $6.5 billion for our state government and $3 billion to flow directly to New Jersey counties and municipalities, but it still has to make its way through the Senate. In Woodland Park, that funding would help the mayor and council address the pandemic, pay essential workers, bolster critical services like the volunteer fire department. According to the Congressional Budget Office, funding for states and local communities provides the biggest bang for the buck when it comes to stimulating our economy. And, I cannot imagine that the height of irony would be that those who helped us get to the most difficult parts of the pandemic and who we still need, first responders, public health nurses, our health departments, and others, would be on the unemployment line instead of on the front lines meeting the challenges of the pandemic. I've also fought to secure $30 billion for our public transit agencies, so they're poised to get New Jerseyans back to work once the pandemic subsides. We know that even the most essential workers that have kept us safe while we were at home at times and they were working, doing the dangerous jobs, they use public transit to be able to get around. And this bill also includes something our parents, students, and teachers care about deeply, and that's reopening schools safely. Billions will go helping our schools improve ventilation systems, provide educators with PPE, help to reduce class sizes, address learning losses, and more. Everyone wants our schools to reopen, but we need to make sure that we can do it safely and equitably. So let me close and say that many ask if this bill will pass with bipartisan support. I hope it does, because these ideas have bipartisan support across the country. At the end of the day, however, I believe most people, especially here in New Jersey, care more about Congress getting something done than whatever legislative process gets it done. It's simple. People want us to do our jobs. And while I sincerely hope that Republicans will join us, and there are negotiations with them to try to see if we can get our colleagues to support it, I think it'd be hard to vote against direct payments to workers, tax relief for families, help for schools to safely reopen, and so on. People want to get back to their lives. To me, that's what this bill is all about. The American Rescue Plan is about rescuing the American way of life. so our children and grandchildren can learn in classrooms instead of on computer screens, so we can gather together with loved ones instead of worrying about them getting sick, so that we can join hands in our houses of worship to uplift each other in prayer, so that we can reconnect with each other and restore a sense of community and common purpose in towns and cities, large and small, across the nation. That's the kind of unity that I am hoping for. It's the kind of unity that matters. It's the kind of unity I'm working to try to achieve.